Welcome back to Remodeling Reinvented. Today we're joined by Caroline Broderick, a reporter from Homes.com News. In this episode, we are talking about what's really happening in today's housing market. We are covering everything from design to remodeling versus moving, home values, and design trends. This is an insightful conversation if you're thinking about what's next for your home. We hope you enjoy the episode. Caroline, welcome to Remodeling Reinvented.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. So excited, Caitlin, Diana, to chat about homes and trends and what's happening out there in the market.
Yeah, us too. And on that note, are there any hot topics you can share with us that's happening in today's housing market or anything off the top of your head?
Yeah, I think the first thing that always comes to mind for me, and I think naturally for everybody else, is affordability. Um, we saw home prices now compared to 2019 or more than double the price. It's a 53% increase, I believe. That's based on NAHB analysis. And so crazy to see home prices get so high. At the same time, we're not seeing incomes increase at the same amount. And this all just spawned from the pandemic, right? And so I think that's just always the first thing that pops in my head, affordability, watching home prices, seeing what's out there. Obviously, right now, we're in the spring housing market, which is the busiest time to be in the market. More people are listing their homes, more people are buying and coming to the market. Just naturally, more transactions are happening. And so it's super interesting to kind of see when affordability is happening, some consumer uncertainty as well. We're seeing mortgage rates move around too. All these different factors. It's really interesting to see what's happening in the spring market. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind when you ask.
Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those regional nuances that you're seeing, maybe what's happening nationally versus markets like San Diego or Southern California?
Absolutely. Yeah, so homes.com, people know, I think most that it's a listing site. You could go, you can find a home, you can find a rental, you can find all the properties that are listed publicly on the MLS. And with that, we also have a team of news reporters like me. I think we have about 12 other reporters across the entire country. So I cover the Midwest, but we do have a reporter in California who's fantastic, Moira Ritter. So she's always writing about what's happening in California. And we have a team of analysts that go through all this incredible data and kind of distills it down, compares it to what's happening. And that's both nationally and locally. And so with my work, something that I've done recently, kind of taking more of a nationwide lens right now, is I wrote, I believe it was in March, about the spring housing market and what's happening to buyers across the country. Texas, Chicago, talked to agents. And what was really interesting to me is I spoke with a lot of first time buyers and they are struggling. We talk about affordability. First time buyers are always the ones who are a lot more price conscious, more sensitive to price tags. I think increasingly people are more sensitive to price tags, as we talked about prices going up, mortgage rates, and then there's also inflation, wages aren't rising. And so first time buyers are telling me a lot of interesting things. They're going up against multiple offers, they're losing, they have slim pickings, low inventory, and that's been really hard for people who already don't have a lot of options, maybe in a 300,000 max price budget, in some areas, probably even less than that. So they're extremely challenged. I spoke to people who put offers on homes with holes in the ground, holes in the wall, like buckling siding, where the home might have mold problems that obviously they're going through inspection, different things like that. They can't move in for months because they have to put so much work into it. And so that's something I heard nationally. And that's just kind of the reality of some buyers out there right now, first time buyers. When we look nationally at home prices and things happening right now, everything on paper looks a lot better. So it was really interesting hearing these really challenging experiences from people on the ground and then looking at the data and saying, this should all be better. Price appreciation is slowing down. So we just released our March reports, and home prices in March increased about 1.8%, I believe. And that's been pretty on par the last few months nationally. It's only a little bit over 1%, and that's coming off of, way higher price appreciations. But that's not what's happening regionally. So I think probably in San Diego, it's laughable to think about the median sale price being 300 and like $85,000 because in San Diego, it's $1.1 million
Yeah.
as of our
Yeah.
latest report. So you see like national headlines, you see national stats. Real estate is completely regional. And so, talking a little bit more about what's happening in San Diego, we have a market analyst there. His name is Joshua Ohl. And he was writing about something that I think is really interesting for San Diego too is their unique inventory challenge. So inventory's been rising everywhere. It's like chime in if you've like heard this from your clients. I'm curious if any like people who have gone and sought out remodeling did so because they couldn't find anything, which I'm sure is pretty common.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's been a problem for a long time here. I mean,
Mhm.
when you're looking to purchase a house, people are outbidding each other. It turns into these bidding wars. Sometimes they go through the process and in the end, they're like, gosh, I might as well just remodel my
Right.
own house.
Mhm.
I love the location. I love my neighbors. I'm emotionally tied to this house. Location's obviously the number one thing. I mean, people, I know Jackson Design Remodeling, the clientele, a lot of them are in the coastal areas, but a lot of those homes are also older that need some work. And then some people buy or purchase homes with the intent to remodel. So that's why they're doing it. I like the
Yeah,
location. This is a good property. I see long-term value, I'm gonna invest into a remodel. Yeah.
absolutely.
Or it's
That's
a
really
little
interesting to hear. Like,
yeah.
that's kinda Chicago. So the Midwest has been really interesting compared nationally because our cost of living is so much lower. And so we're right now seeing really low inventory with the same thing, a lot of multiple bids. So many people looking at the same properties because there's not a lot to go around. In San Diego, at least in March, inventory only increased, I think it was about 1%. Inventory in San Diego is significantly lower than it was pre-pandemic, and we're talking like 6 years later, and there's still no normalization there. And when we talked about the median home price is $1.1 million, I'm curious because I focus on the Midwest. Our analyst mentioned Prop 13 as something keeping people in their homes, and so that's the kind of capped property taxes based on the price you purchased your home when you purchased it, kind of limiting how high property taxes can go. And so if someone in San Diego is wanting to move to a new home, they're going to have to pay a lot more property taxes. And that's kind of something that's creating a unique lock in effect, at least in your market, from what our analysts have said.
Yeah, the lock-in effect, like, where if you have your mortgage rate, you don't want low mortgage rate, you don't wanna give it up. I mean, I know for me personally, I had thought about moving at one point, and I'm in a kinda normal neighborhood of San Diego, nothing too expensive, but even those home prices have gone way up since I purchased the home, but it's hard to let go of that low mortgage rate, so you feel like you just wanna stay where you're at. I look at these areas of San Diego that I wanna possibly move to, and I'm like, "Gosh, really? Like, that's what they're charging?" So, I even read a stat on Houzz that it was, something that in the nation, I think it was like 65% of people in San Diego plan to stay in their home for 20 plus years. We share that at our monthly seminars because it's like, hey, we understand people here, they want to stay put.
Mhm.
So remodeling does make sense in a lot of cases, but not always. I mean, there are definitely cases where it's like, you might as well move. It just depends the location. And I know we talked about this when we were talking a couple weeks ago, just the importance of location. Is that still a factor nationally?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like there are 2 things you can't ever escape. Like, if you're in the home search or maybe you're deciding between remodeling and wanting to move, 2 non-negotiables should be the location you want to be in, obviously, and what you can afford. You know, if moving means that your monthly payment is going to be really pushing it, then I mean, that's something that you can't really change very much, right? If mortgage rates are at they're at, you have the down payment that you do, whatever financial realities are there for you, you shouldn't have to sacrifice what you can actually afford, right? And so I think those 2 things are really important. That's what I hear when I talk to real estate agents. You know, I'm no real estate expert. I'm not given, any advice here that people should listen to. This is just purely what I hear when I talk to real estate agents, talk to buyers, talk to sellers every day. So
Yes.
those 2 things, I think absolutely. And here in Chicago, it's really interesting because it's all a location game in a way, and I'm sure you're seeing this too in Southern California. There are certain neighborhoods, pockets that can be so small that are the most competitive because everybody wants to be there. And it's really interesting to see how high that demand and how low the supply is just kind of shooting those prices up, shooting those bids up.
Yeah, exactly. And you nailed it, just the different reasons why they would do that. And a lot of times we found that we get a lot of calls at Jackson when they've just purchased a home and maybe they're just not happy with the style of the home, or it could be the layout just doesn't work for them. There's all kinds of different styles of homes here. I mean, there's Spanish style homes. There's lots of mid-century modern or ranch style homes, but we do these before and afters and it doesn't match their taste. So, yeah, it's just really interesting how real estate has developed over the years, and like you said, inventory is such a hot commodity here. It's
Well,
yeah.
and right, the ADUs, like, everyone's building an ADU, and so,
Yes. Do you guys
you
have ADUs
Interest
is it a big
in the Midwest?
Not like you do. So in Chicago, at least, they just passed less than a year ago, probably maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. They just passed approvals to put ADUs after a pilot program here in Chicago, but it's only in select areas and there are a lot of restrictions.
Yeah, it ours, they loosened the restrictions back in, I wanna say it was, like, late 2018, 2019, and it has completely changed the real estate market here, and now people are building ADUs in their backyard, using it as a rental property, or having their adult children move back in if they can't afford their own home. So they're like, "I'm gonna
true.
just live with mom and dad for a while in their ADU," or even the reverse, where maybe the adult children have remodeled their home, but they want to build or remodel some sort of ADU for their aging parent. So it's really become a hot topic here in San Diego. Yeah.
I do have a question for you both. You know, they talk about like the 5 Ds when it comes to moving. It's like divorce, death, downsizing is like one of them. I'm curious about if you hear from clients who need to, one, maybe diapers is another D, their family is growing. And I'm curious about the conversations you might have with people who maybe want to move to a bigger home. Are they doing additions? Are those costs about the same as if they were to just move instead? How are they dealing with that? And then downsizing. Like if you can't move but you feel like your home is kind of too big for you, how do you have that conversation with the remodeler? How can we stay here and downsize? Is that even possible?
I know. I mean, I would say if anything, most of our clientele are adding on and going bigger.
Yeah.
Cost wise, it usually does make sense to do the addition versus moving, but not in every instance. I mean, there could be some structural challenges. And I think just going through that process is what, and I know Diana, you can probably speak to this. They typically like to have that conversation and figure out those challenges. Right,
Yeah,
Diana?
right, with our project directors, they kind of review their needs and their life and, try to figure out, is it an ADU, like, the greatest investment I can make right now? How do I make my existing living space more practical? So, it's a layout feature sometimes with clients, but, it just varies. It varies.
Yeah, and downsizing, it does happen. I mean, there could, but it's hard, man. People don't want to let go of their property.
Mhm.
Maybe they've had it a long time, or We see a lot of what we call legacy homes here in San Diego, where the parents want to gift their homes to their children after they pass away. It's a long-term investment here, and people are very aware of it. So someone who's in some of these more desirable locations, they don't wanna downsize. As
Yeah, so
tempting
what
as it may
Interesting.
be, people really don't. They know it's a valuable property and it's really hard to let go of something that maybe they bought their home in 2002 for, it could be in, I'll give an example, in La Jolla, there could be a home that was maybe 1.5 million when they bought it, and now it's 4.5, 5 million at this point. So it's kind of hard to let go of those properties, and if they can pass it along to their children, they try to do that in a lot of cases. We see that a lot, especially when they're remodeling. They're like, hey, I want my children's input, even on some of the style choices in some cases.
because that's
Yeah,
what's gonna be lasting when they're going.
that's
Right.
been a really interesting thing that we've seen.
Huh. So the children are planning to move into these homes, not just take ownership and then sell them and kind of get the profits from that. They're actually just going to stay in
Mhm.
the
I
home.
think, yeah,
Wow.
I think it's well, and then it's like, gosh, if there's multiple siblings, it's like who's going to move into the home, and so it's figuring all that out, Or if the children want to use it as a rental property, perhaps, and like they hold on to it, they can collect on that income. So it's just, I think in general, it's just holding on to the property as much as possible. It's hard to let go when it's so
So
valuable.
it's valuable, and the
Yeah,
incentives to stay in it now, as you mentioned, the tax incentives and then the ADU, building an ADU, and you can gain income, so much income from that.
exactly. Yeah, I agree. Jumping topics a little bit, what are some trends that you've seen from designers and that you've noticed on a national level? I know you've attended some different events, but just in general, have you noticed what designers are saying? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I cover things like real estate, what's happening in the market in the Midwest, cool houses, but I also do a lot of design and also new construction focused work. So, Caitlin, we met when I was writing for Pro Remodeler and Pro Builder, which are trade publications for remodelers and home builders. And so I still write about those topics all the time, which I love so much. And so, what I hear from designers is something I wrote about in Pro Remodeler, I think in 2023. So it makes me so excited to see everyone else talk about it now is the idea of personalization and customization and dopamine decor. And that looks like people are being more adventurous. They're being more themselves. They're adding more color, doing more pattern, finding unique things and wanting their space to reflect them. And with that, I think comes like this element of comfort. But I think kind of dissecting that trend of wanting things personalized, there are some very specific things I noticed recently at KBIS, the Kitchen and Bath Industry Show, which is half of Design and Construction Week and the largest gathering of home builders and designers nationally. And so some things I saw and talked to designers about were one, obviously the use of more color and more specifically colorize what is kind of happening right now is we saw a lot of pink, which I thought was so fun. So much more pink in the kind of vignettes that brands were kind of showcasing, their products in. So they maybe work with the designer or they have the designers on their staff and they curate this gorgeous like kitchen you can walk through and it has all their products and it's obviously always the most trendy
Yeah,
on point design. So we saw a lot of pink there, also moody colors, like really dark, like think like ox blood or like deep reds, deep purples, like deep blues, just moodiness, like emerald greens.
I love emerald green.
Oh my gosh, and I'm sure you both have heard a lot about color drenching, where people are painting their ceilings, the trim, the walls, everything the same color, and
Right.
then doing that in, like, a deep emerald green. And then there's a lot of kind of shiny is the way I could kind of describe it, like, a lot more shiny finishes. So if we're talking, like, color drenching, think of, like, a high gloss ceiling. So I talked to the team at Sherwin-Williams, and I was, chatting with them about kind of what's happening, and they mentioned high gloss finishes have been super in the past few years. But then also if you look at fixtures and sinks, you see a lot of chrome, super shiny reflective chrome, maybe even copper. I spoke to a designer who said color and shiny things kind of go hand in hand because they can be so kind of reflective and also let the color really shine in the space, which I thought was really interesting. And both of those seem so daring to me, like this super sleek chrome bathroom faucet with like a deep red, paint or wallpaper all around. I just think is such a statement, and people are making statements in their home. And then on the other side of it, when we're talking about comfort, there's a lot of bringing back traditional elements. So people love a natural wood right now. Give us the warmth of wood. We don't want like the grayish floors. White oak is gorgeous. I love white oak, light oak in general, but a lot of people are loving like the walnuts and the deeper and wanting that warmth. Like those mid-century kind of hues, like this familiarity that's coming back. And I think that's really cool to see. And you're seeing that in the kitchens, you're seeing that in the bathrooms. It's kind of all over the home.
Yeah, people are probably taking more chances than they used to be. And it makes perfect sense, especially in San Diego, where they are planning to live here.
Yes.
They're not so worried about resale value because they plan to live long term. It's like, this is my house. I can do what I want with
Mhm.
it.
Right. You don't like my hot pink bathroom? Like, it's mine,
I
and
mean,
you're
it's like, you do you, you do you. I know. I wonder if that movie, that Barbie movie, had anything to do with Pink coming back in a big way. That would be interesting to look at.
right. Totally.
So when is it that people prioritize personalization versus market appeal?
Yeah, I think like you're saying in Southern California where people are staying in their homes a lot longer, that makes a lot of sense. I also think there's really this kind of privilege aspect that comes with not having to think about resale value because, somebody who really wants to have a strong ROI and kind of relies on that, wants to kind of recoup their investment and move on, probably like a first time buyer and wanting to eventually be a move up buyer, they kinda need to think of that resale value realistically.
Yeah.
You can still make a lot of temporary changes. You can always paint over paint, you know? So I think that a lot of that is probably happening more on the luxury end. But you can always make daring choices if they're temporary, You can fix out a faucet, you can paint a wall, you can remove wallpaper, and personally, like, I didn't know I wanted a pink toilet seat until I found one, and I thought,
Oh my
"I
gosh.
love that," and guess what? I can swap the old one back in right after.
I love that. I love that. And you touched on different values throughout the country. You're seeing a bit of an increase. Earlier, when we had talked, you had said you could maybe talk about how realtors come up with their listing price. Because I think the prices and everything have gone up. Sometimes it's difficult from a homeowner standpoint to know how much is my home worth if I do want to sell it. How do I price it where it's not too low or not too high?
Mhm. Well, one thing that everyone says to me is do not listen to the estimated values on listing sites. Homes does it obviously. All the sites have, "Hey, here is what we estimate your home value to be." Now you have to understand those estimates are not taking into account what real estate agents do a lot of research on, and that's on comps, comparables, what comparable sales have happened recently that will help kind of guide the understanding what the appetite in the market will be. And so a lot of people will hear that and think, okay, let me look at maybe my next door neighbor's house and see when it last sold. And that doesn't work. It comes down to a lot of specifics. And one is timing. If a sale happened 6 months ago, you can't say your home's going to sell for the same thing, for example. A lot changes in a short amount of time in the market. So it has to be a little, I would say 6 months is probably fine to use as a baseline. This is going off what agents have told me. But let's say, like, if you wanna look like 2 years ago, don't use that as a comparable, right? So, recent sales, very comparable to your home, and that's taking in a lot. So, that's the age of your home, that's, like, the mechanics, the systems, like, when's the last time you updated those? It comes down to the finishes, the layout, everything. If you have your house and the house next to you, they're the exact same model, let's say, that you got from a builder, but one person updated theirs, remodeled it, they're gonna naturally have a higher value in the market, and people are gonna want that probably a little bit more. It can probably even come down to location on the street, everything, and a lot of people don't understand the idea of maybe something is very personal to them, and it means a lot to them, but that might not reflect in the market. Maybe you love Italy. You flew someone in from Italy to this mural of this, like, beautiful Tuscan sunset, and you love it so much. Buyers out there aren't gonna love it as much as you. They don't have that personal value that you do, and everybody has things like that in their home. That's why homes are so special. They're so personal to us. But sometimes you need to put that personal aside when it comes to pricing and trust your professionals and ask them, ask your agents, where did you get this number from? They should be able to show you comparables and should be able to tell you, this is exactly where I got it from and this is what informed my decision. So you can and you should ask them that if there's any conversation or questioning of, I don't think my home should be at this price.
Yeah. And asking those questions. I think that's great. Great advice. Moving on to mortgage rates, how do you believe that mortgage rates are affecting what's happening at the moment?
I think mortgage rates have been the conversation for so many years because of the affordability challenges that we've talked about. People are so sensitive to their monthly payment, and a little move in a mortgage rate can change someone's monthly payment. And when we think about housing costs, mortgage is just one piece of the puzzle. Property taxes, insurances, both of those things are going up a lot. So anywhere that maybe there seems to be an area that people can get a little bit more affordability, like mortgage rates, that's something people are going to be really attuned to. So right now we're seeing mortgage rates, I believe, last week 6.23, the average for a fixed rate 30-year mortgage. Now that's a lot higher than we saw in the pandemic days. So Caitlin, like you mentioned, you don't want to get out of your mortgage rate. A lot of people don't want to. Um, what's happening right now is that mortgage rates rely on everything happening in the world. It's not just pulled based off of one thing, it's kind of a culmination of things that influence a mortgage rate. So we saw with the conflict in the Middle East happening, we saw mortgage rates go up after a brief dip below, 6%. And what we're seeing now, though, is a lot more people are getting used to mortgage rates being this high. So, at least in this spring market, there's been an uptick in purchase applications, there's been an uptick in refinancing. So, people are coming to market and getting more used to what these mortgage rates are because in reality, it is too hard to time the market. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's gonna influence that mortgage rate. And we have this our fantastic chief residential economist, Brad Case, puts out an analysis every single week for homeowners, kind of to help them digest and really dig deep into something happening. And when he talks about mortgage rates, at least this last week, he said, timing the market is hard because if you're waiting for the mortgage rate to be as low as it can be and you're going to jump in, don't you think so many other buyers are doing the same? So many people are trying to also get a little bit of relief on their monthly payments. And so then what happens? An influx of buyers come to market, and now you're facing multiple offers, maybe you're facing more bids. It's a more challenging environment. So it's really hard to time the market. I think mortgage rates are something that people are watching because the affordability struggle is real right now. And I think it makes sense. And if we look at home builders, They're offering mortgage rate buy downs. It's something people are watching, but it is a one piece of the puzzle. And if you work with an agent and work with a loan officer who can be really creative, I've spoken to a lot of people who have found really creative ways to get points so they can lower their mortgage rates, financing points. You can find creative ways to leverage your financing, and there are other options out there, but
Yeah. Wow. It's so complex, all of that.
it is.
And we talked about setting the price, and I'm kind of jumping back to that. Earlier, when we spoke, we talked about how sometimes someone sets a price too high for their home and then they end up cutting the price down. How does that affect somebody's chances of selling their home successfully? Do people who are looking at that, do they think, oh, is there something wrong with it? Or,
I think from what I've heard from agents, pricing is extremely important because, well, marketing overall, you need to kind of have the full package. Let's say if you want your home to go on the first weekend, you need to have the whole package. But pricing is extremely important. We're talking about affordability. We're talking about one of the biggest transactions someone will ever make in their lifetime is buying a home. So pricing is important. Optics wise, kind of what it looks like with pricing from what I've heard from agents is sometimes maybe there's a disagreement on what someone thinks that their home should be priced. So maybe you say, okay, let's try your price. And if it doesn't work out, we'll lower it to mine. There's not anything necessarily bad about doing a price cut because it happens all the time. And I think in some markets it's been happening a lot more frequently we've seen. But I think there's an element, something I've heard from an agent, which was really interesting, always stuck with me, was that some sellers will just want to trim the price. Just trim it over time, right? Maybe you take like 10K off, maybe the next month you take another, and you're kind of trimming it down. What that tells the market or tells buyers is I'm going to keep waiting because they're going to keep trimming it. They're going to keep trimming it. So I'm just going to wait until this lands at a number I like. And so that's something I've heard of, like, not the best way to do it. Another thing is a lot of times if someone thinks your property is fantastic, it's a little too overpriced, they might not put an offer in. But what could be happening is people could be watching your property and waiting for that price cut. So the price cut happens and maybe you get an offer because someone's been waiting. So sometimes for some buyers, I spoke to this fantastic agent in Seattle who did this and does this for her clients. Seattle is kind of similar. It's really expensive. Like Southern California, inventory goes really fast. She often advises buyers to look for the homes that have been sitting on the market without these price cuts and being the one to offer that price cut because they're going to be a lot more willing to do that, and you're going to get in before people fly in to take advantage of that price cut. If you're the one who's making it, let's say you have a $700,000 whatever and you say, hey, here's 650 or however much you want to do, they'd be a lot more willing to talk to you, I think, if you're the one who is making that price cut and then you're beating out the competition. But to kind of go back to your original question, trust your real estate agent, ask them if you have any hesitations around that price, and then just be mindful of what that, being methodical and being strategic about those price cuts and what it, would
yeah,
visualize and show to the market.
yeah, that makes sense. And jumping back to, I love talking to you about design trends, and back to KBIS, you had mentioned something about roomifications of kitchens, and it was an article that you had written. By the way, for the listeners, we're going to be linking some various articles that Caroline is referring to in this interview, so you'll see that in the episode description. But talk to us about this roomification of kitchens and what that means.
Yes. So this was not something on my radar at all before I went to KBIS. And I had interviewed over a dozen designers and brands, and I kept picking up on what I called the living roomification of kitchens. And it's this idea of kitchens are meshing more with the living room and becoming less utilitarian and more comfortable. And we kind of talked about this, right? With like the comfort element and designers and homeowners wanting comfort. And so what that looks like is adding more maybe furniture like items into the kitchen. So At KBIS, there was the brand Monogram. They had this booth that was emphasizing this, and every designer kept talking about this booth. And what it looks like is the kitchen island looks like a piece of furniture. It looks like a table. It has legs that might look like an ornamental dining room table leg. It's wooden. You maybe have appliances hidden and panelized in really interesting ways. I saw a fridge that looks like an armoire. Like, you didn't even know that there was a fridge there. You thought you would open it and maybe see some sweaters or blankets or dishware, not a fridge. And it just blended in like a beautiful piece of furniture with gorgeous molding all around. And it was in this burl wood. So it really made a statement. Didn't know it was an appliance. And very interestingly as well, they did this treatment on the floor, which was, I believe it was all wood floor, but right under the island in the kitchen, there was tile that imitated what a rug maybe under a table. But it works in the kitchen because it's tile, so you could clean it a lot better. And all of these elements of adding plush seating, maybe extra seating that isn't like a bar stool. It looks like a comfy couch you can lounge on. And I've talked to an architect here in the city who told me they're doing a lot more like what they called little coffee nooks, where it's like plush seating by a fireplace and it's right next to the, like, in the kitchen practically. And there's this interesting element of you think about how the kitchen is transformed over the years. Obviously you cook there, but you also host. And now you also think of the living room and how everyone used to gather around the fireplace, or everyone used to gather around the TV solely. Now we're on our devices a lot. We can do that anywhere. And so maybe you want to do that in the kitchen and you
Right.
want a comfy place to kind of relax and kind of cozy up, and just it's all kind of meshing together. And then we also think of the scullery kitchen or the messy kitchen, and a lot more of those are happening where there's a second kitchen kind of hidden away where you can actually be really messy and do all those messy things. And so that is a really interesting aspect because it's not being done in the kitchen as much, maybe. And the kitchen is just more used for kind of like a hangout spot.
Wow. Gosh, I wish I had one of those.
I know, me too.
Right? A
I'll
prep
take it.
a prep area where I can be all messy and then, keep the kitchen all clean.
Living room kitchen.
Wow. No, we definitely are seeing that, all those details and islands, and people are gathering in the kitchen as their almost primary area.
Mhm.
There's TVs in kitchen, and like you said, I do believe having your smartphone, you can do it from anywhere, so people just tend to gather where people are prepping the food, and maybe they're mixing up cocktails if they're entertaining and they're just in there hanging out. It's just more of a casual environment
Mhm.
that people seem to gravitate towards. So yeah, that's super interesting. And speaking of cocktails, you talked to us about an ice trend that you're seeing a lot of customized ice. And I know I can personally speak to it, but talk to us about that.
Yeah, you have to chime in, Caitlin, because I remember you talking about how this hit home for you. So something else I saw at KBIS that just took me, like, it just shocked me, and I saw it everywhere, was ice. So customizable ice, I saw GE, I saw LG, and I saw Whirlpool leaning into all these different ice options. So Whirlpool is releasing, or maybe they just released, they debuted it at the show, the first fridge ever that dispenses nugget ice, or that, like, pebble ice. So it's
Yes.
the one you get at Chick-fil-A, it's the one that, like, Starbucks shifted to. It's this aerated little ice that people love chewing, but they
Yeah.
also love the look of it, right? You have these little, like, ice pellets, and you can get so much more ice, and it doesn't melt either as quickly, I've heard. Just
Yeah.
people are obsessed with this ice, right? And so that was there at in the fridge, and then GE kind of always with their Opal nugget ice maker, they kind
Uh-huh.
of created this area years ago, and it's a countertop ice maker where it dispenses this ice. They're coming out with new colors, which are gorgeous. They, like, had a few prototypes of, like, rich chocolates and plums and, like, all these, like, kind of delicious colors, and then a smaller version too. For dorm rooms, they said smaller kitchens. Like, so obviously, more people want this ice. And then GE also released a fridge where you can choose the size of ice you want. So you can have it like start, it's like if you had an ice tray and you just filled it with different amounts of water. That's kind of how you could, as big to small, you can choose how big you want your ice to be. And then LG with this spherical ice, which I feel like a couple years ago we saw, right? We saw these fridges with the giant, like, spherical ice that's really great for a cocktail. You put, like, maybe make an old fashioned, you put that in there. It's gorgeous. It's lush. It's like makes a statement.
Yes.
Now they're doing smaller versions of the spherical ice, which I'm personally obsessed with. I want that. And
Yes.
then they have an even bigger version of it.
This is the reason I bought my new refrigerator. Okay. It makes
There you
four
go.
4 different types of ice, and that was the sole reason I purchased this fridge, in addition to doing all of the basic things that a refrigerator needs to be able to do for you. But it had been like 10 years since I purchased a new fridge, and it was time, so I made the investment, and so it makes a beautiful, round, spherical craft ice that I use for old fashions, and we call it Old Fashioned Fridays. It is life changing. So it's a lot of fun, especially if you like to entertain and
Yeah.
lots of innovations, I will tell you. And
It's all about those moments. Like, when I talk to these brands, it's because people love these moments of you can get, like, a little treat for yourself. Like, maybe you make your old fashioned every Friday and you have that
yes,
ice, or maybe you're making your iced coffee and you just love that nugget ice, and every morning you get to have that. And
yes.
it's just kind of taken the
It's like a
country, I think, by
ritual.
storm.
People have their
Yes.
own rituals, and I think it's really interesting how trends and it translates to everything we do. Well, I think we're gonna jump over to Diana for the quickfire round.
All right, Caroline. What is the most out there home that you have ever seen or written about?
I have spoken to owners of homes that were a former grain silo, banks, churches, like the most strange thing. I've written a lot about the Pope's childhood home as well. Like, all these homes are just so interesting to me because they're so personal. When it comes to out there homes, there's one that always comes to mind. And it's in Indiana, and the owner was very into a specific type of art. So she had it everywhere in her home, and she had these vibrant colors. It was very surrealist, modern. And so think like black lacquer finishes, deep reds, and deep purples, and all this like surrealist art everywhere on a backdrop of like a very sleek white home with all these bright finishes. And what was very interesting to me is that she also owned a few monkeys. And
Okay.
you didn't see it in the listing photos necessarily, but if you did the virtual tour, there was one room with a giant cage, and
Oh
you
no.
thought, "Hmm, what's in that?" And they're her pet, they're her companions, and I just did not expect to see that.
Wow.
Okay.
It was beautiful speaking to her about where she sourced all of her art, and I love a home that makes you go, "Who lives in there?" Because that is someone who is truly treating their home as it should be. It's their sanctuary, it's their space, and that was just so fascinating to me.
So, you wrote an article recently about the HBO documentary called The Last Right. It's the last home that Frank Lloyd Wright ever designed. Talk to us about that experience.
That was so cool. I had seen chatter about, it's called River Rock is the name of the house, and The Last Rite is the docu-series. It was written about because they had just opened for short-term rentals, so you can actually stay there. So it's a mother and a daughter who were looking for a home, like kind of a plot of land where they could have multiple homes they could live in. Their brother could possibly live too. So a nice large plot of land in Ohio. and they happened to see a Frank Lloyd Wright home for sale on multiple acres, and that was a Lewis Penfield house, which already was used for short-term rentals, and there's already another house on the land, and the daughter, Sarah, being very interested in Wright, was like, "Whoa, this might be an incredible thing for us," and it happened to come with the blueprints for a house that Wright designed that never was built. It was also commissioned by Lewis Penfield. Never built. It was built 2025. Apparently, the last residential design that Frank Lloyd Wright ever did, because it was mailed to Lewis Penfield the week Wright died, and it allegedly was on his drawing board when he passed away in
Whoa.
Wow.
1959. And so this mother and this daughter painstakingly brought this home to life, and I got to interview them, and I got to go to Ohio, and I got to tour and walk through this home, and it is gorgeous. It is so interesting because if you've been in a Wright home, obviously they're older. This home, you could tell it was new, but it was also a Wright home. So it was kind of this weird juxtaposition of like, wow, all these built-ins are so clean and new, but this is such a Wright experience being in the home.
Thank you so much for joining us today and talking to us about all of these fascinating things. You had so much factual knowledge to share, and homeowners, if they're thinking about either remodeling or moving or just interested in the housing market in general, I think hopefully they'll get some good takeaways from this conversation.
Yes, thank you both for having me. Thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you again to Caroline Broderick from Homes.com for joining us and for sharing her perspective. If you're thinking about remodeling or just trying to make sense of today's market, we hope this gave you a helpful starting point. You can find more resources in the episode description, and we'll talk to you next time on Remodeling Reinvented.